Isn't it true that nothing can quite throw a wrench in our best laid reading plans quite like being in a reading slump, where we experience low energy, low motivation, low desire to pick up those books that we know we should be reading? We all experience reading slumps, but we're not helpless in the face of them. If you're a reader, just know that even if you're not in one now, eventually your motivation will wane. Eventually your desire will sink. And now is a great time for you to be preparing for when that day comes. So what do you do in the face of a reading slump? That's the question that we're going to answer here in this video. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to share some thoughts that were inspired by the suggestions you gave me when I asked you for your tips on getting out of a reading slump. And then second, I'm going to recommend 3 books or kinds of books that will help you get out of your next reading slump, whenever that is. With that being said, let's jump into those tips. Yesterday, I did the dangerous thing of asking everyone here on Instagram what your tips were, and I got some interesting results that I'd like to share with you and give my thoughts on. Just as a reminder, the prompt was, what tips do you have or what do you do to get out of your reading slumps? And the first answer was, I actually just force myself to start reading again. Smiley face. As you can tell, they are smiling because they are forcing themselves not only to read, but to be happy about it. And so if you haven't considered just forcing yourself to read, well, now you know. Just force yourself to read. All right, we are looking at the next tip on how to get out of a reading slump. This person says, I just read. Ha 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 ha. Probably not helpful, but it works for me. Well, this is another person that says, hey, just read. Or in the words of my main man, Shia LaBeouf, just do it.
Do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams.
I mean, that's partially in jest, but for real, sometimes there are people who just need to toughen up a little bit, do something you don't want to do, that's being an adult, and just reading. The next tip is actually quite related to the last two, and this person says, jump right back in, joy emoji, shrugging emoji, life is busy. In other words, ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
We're gonna go right on ahead and leave that one alone and move on to our next tip. This person says, I have found total genre pivots to be helpful, particularly if it's nonfiction burnout. So if you're reading a nonfiction book on a particular topic, read something totally different. Or if you're reading nonfiction, you might need to switch to reading fiction for a while or something like that. I think that's a great tip. Throw some variety into your reading, and I bet you will be surprised by how much you are able to get back on track. I love this next tip. It's super helpful. I set a small daily goal, 10 pages or so. I'll often end up reading more once I get into it. The value of this tip is getting over that initial reading hump, the initial discomfort you feel from reading a book that you don't really want to be reading in that particular moment. And then once you get over that hump, you start to get into the flow state, you start to read more easily, you gain momentum. This is very similar to a reading technique that I utilize all the time called drip reading, where I just make it my goal to read 10 pages of a particular book every single day. It's partially how I'm able to be so prolific in my reading. The next tip is actually one that many of you have shared with me over the last day, and it's to read short books. I think this is a great way for you to get out of a reading slump because of the idea of momentum. It really feels good to make progress when you're reading a book. And when you're reading a book that's 400 pages, to feel like you've made any progress, you really may have to read like 40 pages. But in order to feel like you've made progress when you're reading a 100-page book, that bar is a lot lower. So I totally agree with the tip of reading short books to get out of a reading slump, to start building some momentum so that you're going downhill. This next tip is similar to the previous one, but there's something different that I'd like to highlight to you. Give yourself a shorter book or a book with shorter chapters. When I'm getting out of a reading slump, I deliberately seek out books that have short chapters. Because for me, each chapter that I finish gives me a sense of fulfillment and therefore a greater desire to start again and read another chapter and watch the snowball grow. So I totally co-sign this tip to find a book with shorter chapters if you want to make your way out of a reading slump. All right, the next one's a serious one. It says, get off my phone. especially no shows/movies. But notice it didn't say educational YouTube videos about getting out of a reading slump. Those ones you want to watch all the way to the end. No, but really, this tip points out that everything is competing for our attention, and we can only truly give our attention to one thing at any given time. And so if we're choosing to watch movies or TV instead of reading, we shouldn't be surprised that we're finding reading to be boring in view of all of the other things that we could be doing. So I think there's a ton of value in deciding to set apart a particular amount of time where you're not going to consume video content or movie content or anything like that, and instead just focus on reading. This next tip is also one that I do often. It says, choose something fun and then just start reading. Totally agree with the importance of choosing what it is you're going to get out of your reading slump with. If you think you're just going to get out of your reading slump by reading the things that got you into your reading slump, as good as they may be, for most of us, that's just not going to work. We're going to have to choose something that we have a high energy for reading, something we have a high desire for, to kind of bring up our desire for reading overall. The next two are kind of similar in some way in that they completely contradict each other. One says media fast, so don't watch TV or movies or anything like that. The other person says Bravo TV. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to get me out of my reading slump, but you know what? We're just going to go with it. The next tip is go to the beach where all I do is read. And while, my Midwesterners out there are crying right now because they don't have access to a beach, most likely, most of us have a certain place or a certain time where we've trained ourselves that all I do is read in this place. All I do is read in this time. Good reminder to circle back on those places because there we'll be more mentally prepared to read. So if you don't have a reading chair, maybe look into making one of your chairs at home the reading chair, or make a particular desk the reading desk, and that'll help you to get out of your reading slump. The next tip is to read a book with someone that interests you. I'm going to take this to mean the value of reading in community, and that is a great tip that we can all take into account. By the way, I do have a Discord server of fellow Christian readers. I will drop the link to my Discord where people just talk about the books that they're reading. I haven't been so active on there recently, but I think it kind of scratches the itch that this person is referring to of reading alongside other people that have the same interests as you. And so you can find the link for that in the description below. The next tip might be the most important one, and it says, watching your posts and videos. Honestly encouraging. This is a great opportunity for me to ask you, if you haven't yet, would you please turn the page on that like button below? It really helps reading content like this get into more people's feeds instead of whatever else YouTube is pushing out on people's news feeds these days. No, but really, it is such an honor that anyone would watch any video I make or read anything that I write. I don't take that lightly. And I hope that everything that I say and everything that I write is an encouragement to you to help you read more and to read better, all for the glory of God. So those were the tips on how you guys get out of your reading slumps. And now we're going to move on to what my 3 book suggestions are to help you get out of your reading slump. And my first recommendation isn't a specific book, but more of a specific kind of book. And that kind of book is a biography or autobiography, especially of someone you're very interested in. The more you have an interest to learn about this person's life, the more I'd recommend using a biography to break up your reading slump. But reading a biography is not without its dangers. Biography can easily be a farrago of myth. I'm sorry, what did he just say? I'm interrupting this book suggestion with a brand new segment that I'm calling #NewWords. One of my absolute favorite things to share about is when I come across a new word in a book that I'm reading, and instead of ignoring it or skipping over it like I know some people do, what I like to do is look it up and then poll the audience. Hey, did you know what this word meant? It was new to me. Today's word is one that was brand new to me when I came across it, and it is farrago. And as you can see by this very scholarly definition, it means a confused mixture. For example, when you're reading a biography, you may come across things that are true and untrue or exaggerations. Hence, a farrago of fact and myth. Have you learned a new word recently? Do you tend to look up the new words you come across, or do you very shamefully skip over them or pretend like you didn't see those words? Let me know in the comments below. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Anyway, like I was saying, the key to this piece is picking out a biography of someone that you're really interested in learning more about. For example, I recently read a biography of Ben Askren, MMA fighter, wrestler, because I'm into that kind of thing. My second recommendation is not a specifically Christian book, but it is one that I've found in Here Are the Principles, short, inspiring, and motivating. And the book recently that I've read that has been short, inspiring, and motivating is The Dip by Seth Godin. Again, this is not a specific recommendation as much as it is a recommendation of the principles behind why I chose this book. It's short, clocks way under 100 pages. It's inspiring. It's for creatives who want to decide what to choose to be excellent at and what to choose to quit at. And the third book is a specific recommendation, and it is Praying the Bible by Don Whitney. This book is so short that you could probably read it in a day if you had a ton of time to read in a day. And what I like about this book and why I would recommend choosing it to get out of a reading slump is he's very clear with the reason he wrote this book. He wrote this book very clearly so that he can teach you a method of prayer called Praying the Bible. The chapters in this one are short, and each of them moves you forward toward the end of learning his method of praying the Bible. And so it's short, it's clear, and every chapter gives you a sense of purpose and achievement moving toward the goal of learning how to pray the Bible. A concise, value-packed book like this will help you to get out of your next reading slump when that day comes. So what other tips do you have for getting out of a reading slump? You can let me know by leaving a comment below. And if you're still here watching this video, I just wanted to say thank you for watching it to the end. And the next video you might want to watch in becoming more consistent with your reading is my video on how to be a reading ninja, how to do drip reading, a technique that I utilize all the time when it comes to reading. You can watch that video by clicking the link below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.